I'm Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and this is Rendering Unconscious. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know I've been talking about having episodes that are sort of group discussions where I invite several people who may or may not have already been on the podcast in the past to come together and have a discussion about certain topics. So this is the first of these episodes, and I've invited some of my favorite writers to talk about their new books about sexuality, kink, queer life, art, magic, writing, and just everything that's going on right now. Tom Bland is here, and his new book is called Camp Fear from Bad Betty Press. You can find him on Twitter at Physis93. That's PHYSIS93. Jason Haaf is here, and his new book is called Harsh Cravings. You can find him on Instagram at Haafwit. That's HAAFWIT. And Zaii Valdes is here, and Zai's new book is called Poetry is Both the Compass and Machete. And you can follow Zaii at Instagram at Ronin versus Strawberry Ice Cream. That's RONIN_VS_strawberry ice cream, as well as the band Violet Silhouette Official at Instagram. And coming up this weekend, if you're in South Florida, Violet Silhouette will be performing on Saturday, the 26th, at La Rosas in Miami. As well, Zaii DJs often at Respectable Street Cafe in West Palm Beach. And if you're in London, you can catch Tom on Monday at Queer Erotica, happening at The Glory on Monday, February 28th at 8 p.m. in London. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. Rendering Unconscious is also a book. Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry, available from Trapart Books, 2019. You can visit our publisher's website, trapart.net. That's TRAPART.net. You can also follow me at Instagram and Twitter at rawsin_. That's RAWSIN_ at Instagram and Twitter. You can support the podcast at our Patreon, patreon.com/Vanessa23Carl. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for supporting Rendering Unconscious podcast and all of my other creative endeavors. So does anyone have anywhere specific they want to begin? Do we keep bitching about Florida? Poetry?
Sounds good.
Does anyone want to talk about their book?
Yeah, Camp Fear was published on Halloween last year. And it's a book about 5 characters, really. It's a verse novel. So the main character is a trainee psychotherapist who used to be a clown and now does drag on the side. And then there's another character called Lilith Johnson, whose husband was got very excited when Tom Cruise showed some interest in his sexuality and his body, and she wrote a memoir based on their relationship. And then there's other characters too. And basically, it's just a kind of absurdist psychedelic trip into the abyss. I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
I think my favorite stuff about Tom's work is that it always interweaving the psychologist and the psychology training in and that perspective of like being in sessions. I love it.
Yeah, like obviously I trained as a psychotherapist quite a long time ago now. Actually, I started the training in 2008. And it was primarily Jungian, but with a very kind of good grounding in psychoanalysis. So I kind of structured the work using kind of psychoanalytic ideas. And they come through some of the seminars you hear about and some of the sessions with the therapist. And I tried to make the therapy as realistic as possible. Although it's also a training analysis. So he's kind of training to be an analyst whilst in the therapy sessions. So it isn't just the kind of person-centered kind of therapy where you say something and the therapist just kind of reciprocates back to you. It's much more kind of in-depth kind of understanding both of the theory as it relates to the individual's life and to him being able to work with clients with that knowledge in his heart, in his soul. That probably makes it sound much more complex than it is.
Yeah, it's much more fun.
Yeah, it is actually a really fun book. And funny too, hopefully funny.
And kinky.
So I didn't quite hear that.
I said, and kinky.
Oh yeah, it is very kinky. It does have its moments. And it's very pan as well. There's something for everyone in there. There's some straight scenes, there's some bi scenes, there's some gay scenes, there's some pan scenes. Everyone is catered for.
What about you guys?
Well, yeah, I guess I'll go into talking a little bit about mine. Mine was the kind of like a little compilation of poems and collages, excuse me, that I just sort of found from, a period of about 10 years, stuff that I did back in high school and even like current photography. And I just sort of put them all together and said, well, this has a particular kind of vibe to it. So I compiled it, in that little work. And for me, it's obviously, the poetry is very easy to get into, obviously like existential stuff and romantic stuff. But for me, it does have this kind of like satanic undertone that I think runs through it. I just actually thought this today while I was brushing my teeth, that poetry is an existential compulsion. So by nature, I think poetry is existential. If you see some of the photography in there, there's stuff where I'm kind of playing with gender and playing with, the Jungian anima and things like that. So I really like that. Yeah, Tom's book had that sort of grounding too. I'm excited to actually read it with that sort of pretext. But yeah, Vanessa, did you have any sort of thing that popped out to you while you were reading it? It's very new to me. So I people have been coming to me and saying, oh, and I was getting some of this and some of that, and I was like, oh, I did not pick that up, but cool.
I like the images and like the collage work because I was expecting it to be poetry, just poetry. And so when I opened it and saw the images and things, I had a good time looking through those.
Awesome.
And Jason knows I love his images of all his like vintage gay porn with his fucking words thrown over top so that they're grammable.
Yeah. Well, you have Bent Book, which is really just like an anthology. I don't know. I'll talk about Harsh Cravings some, just to like maybe start getting used to that. So Harsh Cravings it's basically like a 90-day diary / memoir. There's this book called I Await the Devil's Coming by this author, Mary MacLane. It was published in, I think, 1902. And I didn't know who she was prior, but she was like a 19-year-old queer woman who was like stuck in Montana and chose to write for 90 days straight. And then she had her book published. So in 2020, I kind of saw what was going on, not only with me, like my own life, but like nationally. There was an election, there was COVID, like there was just so much going on. So I chose to take 90 days between August and November of 2020 and write. And sort of just do it as a stream of consciousness. I didn't think each day what I was going to write about. I just woke up at like 6 a.m. and made coffee, and just wherever my head went, that's where the writing would go. So I'm not sure if it qualifies. Maybe there's like poetic elements in it, but it is more, I would say almost like essay based. But like Vanessa was saying, there is some artwork where I include sort of like vintage gay porn, and then put my words on top of it so that it kind of makes it into something else.
Yeah, I love those pieces. I think you should do a whole book of those pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I have enough stuff, so maybe someday.
Give it to me. No, but I love how it's stream of consciousness and how it weaves in like things that you're doing that day with more intimate things with your partner and with other people and sexuality, and it just like runs the gamut. And I love when you're like the scene with your partner in the bathroom, and you're like projecting things onto him, and then you realize like, no, that's not what was happening at all. But I love that. It's so great.
Yeah, it was also a time when like he and I were really the only ones around each other for every day. So it's kind of like all you had really was to like either analyze yourself or the person nearest you. So that was definitely an inspiration.
Yeah.
And New York was really locked down at that point too, huh?
Yeah, I think it was during those months. August was okay. They were like the okay months. It was like, I would say from like March until July was when it was like lockdown. And then it was like kind of easing. And yeah, that's when I chose to write. But it was still very much like in the pandemic.
I also love that book by Mary MacLane was her name. I found it at McNally Jackson one day and I was like, what is this?
Yeah, her like career was sort of all over the place. I think she died pretty young. I mean, I would say like late 40s, but then she like was also a performance artist. She had other works, but I never read them. That's the only thing that I've read of hers. But I just like the time capsule element of it.
So how did you all get into poetry in the first place and writing?
For me, it was definitely in high school, touching on the transcendentalist works by like Emerson and Thoreau. And then I think it just got kind of darker from that point forward. And and then I found the romantics, Byron and Keats and all that stuff. And then I think I just started experimenting with chemicals around the time too. And then I just found that poetry was the technology that was to sort of translate whatever cacophony was happening in my being. So that's when it really kind of went full force for me.
And you got the Oscar Wilde book, right? Did you get that book from Trapart, The Uncanny Aspects of Oscar Wilde?
Oh, no, I should get a copy though.
Oh, you need that book. I just read it. It just came out, I don't know, a month or two ago. And it's so good. I got to edit it and I loved it so much. And it made me go back to Wilde and read Wilde and Bosie and all those guys. It's really good because it talks about their relationship in such a better way than you usually read. Like everyone like demonizes Bosie, and it's just like,
Yeah.
Give me a break. But this person writes about everything in a much more nuanced way and talks about Wilde's parents, and they were into folklore and kind of magic too, and kind of the more magical elements. It's like occultism and sexuality, and it's just good.
Definitely going to pick that one up.
What about you, Jason? When did you start writing?
I mean, my earliest memories of it, I would say like first grade. My school would, I don't know, I guess like the kids would have to write like little short stories or something. And then if the teachers liked it, or I don't know, basically you would get them like binded almost as like a reward, which like I don't really like that element of like rewarding like writing. But yeah, so I still have them here, like here in the apartment. I wrote about like this like mystical clown that would come to me in my sleep, and he was like kind of dressed like a rainbow, and I was like very sad to like go back home at the end. I wrote about there was like a rocket ship that would like go into space. A lot of it was like leaving.
Getting out of Florida.
Yeah, there was one, our friend Melissa read it, which she thought was like very interesting, where I wrote about like a family of anteaters. And like there's one anteater that's like a little bit different than the rest, which was like, I guess, my character. And then we would like compare buttons on our clothes. It was just like, it was weird. But anyways, that was like my first memories of it. And then I went to school for creative writing. And that was like my best time in school in college. Like I actually enjoyed it. And then I didn't write for like 5 or 6 years. Not until I was in my late 20s again. I think I'd like gotten very into film during that time. And I sort of just ignored, but like I didn't really like know what my writing voice was anymore. And then I think when I was like 28, 29, I started experimenting with it, and I started almost writing in tones of like, I kind of wanted to fuck with the audience a little bit, or like present them with information that they didn't quite know what to do with. And I wanted to like make the audience maybe feel a little panicked in a way, but like I thought it was funny. I sort of like wrote this 1-page thing about myself as like a 5-year-old, but the 5-year-old was like a Lolita type character, and it did kind of like push some boundaries because it was a 5-year-old aware of their sexuality and like the adults around them. And that was the first thing that I wrote like again, like since college. And then from there, I've been like steadily doing it.
Can I tell you that I also had a rainbow clown dream when I was young? That was like a reoccurring dream, but it was kind of a nightmare. And it was this reoccurring nightmare that was like a fun house where you just kept having to go through like these mazes and these different rooms and like solving these riddles to try to get out. And like if I didn't solve whatever puzzle, whatever fast enough, like I'd be on this like mirror, and then the mirror would turn into this like long wall, and I'd be like balancing on the top of this like mirror wall, and then it would start filling up with water, and there'd be like sharks, and then like a scorpion would come down like the edge of the mirror, and I'd have to like get out. And at the end of the dream, whatever happened in the fun house, then like this like rainbow clown guy would come, and I was like, oh, I like that, and it had all these like colorful hands everywhere and like rainbow hands, and I would be so happy. It would be like, I want to go to this like smiling guy, and then like these like 2 black hands would come down and they would start like strangling me, and then I would wake up like screaming. So had to clear that.
I'm trying to think of like what the clown, because obviously the clown is almost like, you could say it's just kind of like an archetype, no?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what it would archetypally represent. I wonder if like the clown was like, I don't know, like a modern day, you can maybe trace it to like a shaman or something, you know, or the character, the loony character in the village. Yeah. The loony character in the village that wears masks and paints his face and, you know, goes into these elaborate, you know, dances and entertains the tribe.
Yeah, totally a trickster figure, bringing insight and illumination, but in a little mischievous kind of way.
Right.
I like that.
And there's like a modern sort of revamp of that in like the whole like Joker, you know, the DC Comics Joker, you know, movies and stuff like that. So he's definitely making a comeback again, which is kind of like a sign. Yeah, sort of like a sign of the times, you know. He's like ushering in this new thing of whatever's happening. I don't quite have a name for it, but
who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
What is happening?
I mean, whatever is happening, it's definitely changed my views on like occultism. I guess I'll start with that. And it's made me look at occultism in a much more not so much in a serious sense. You know, I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm getting way more into sort of ceremonial magic and ritual and stuff like that, but you know, just the search for hidden things, and that is what occultism is for me, you know. And as artists, I think that's kind of like what we're doing. We're trying to find these little we're trying to either find little unseen or hidden things or poke holes in the fabric of what's over us so that we can see them. So that's the relationship I think that I find between art and the occult.
Absolutely. And they're both like creative practices, I feel like, bringing your vision into being into the world as well. I found myself this year at New Year's, I was thinking to myself, none of this academic shit matters. Psychoanalysis, like the practice matters, like working with people and helping people like gain insight into their lives and stuff. But none of this stuff like around the fucking scene matters. The only thing that matters is like art and magic. It's like the only thing that matters. I know we talked about that. And then Tom posted a tweet that I made apparently last New Year's Eve that said the exact same thing. And I was like, oh, apparently I've already learned this. But somehow I just like, whoop, get sucked back into things. And then I go, oh, what am I doing? I just need to focus on my art.
And that's like the inner child, I guess, too, right? It's kind of connected to this inner child that's ever reminding us of the important thing, which is really just points back to creation and magic.
Yeah, I also think like, not to get like too caught up in the current climate, but in regards to like clowns, I mean, if you think about it, like we had a president for 4 years that was largely a clown. But also like a charlatan. He was like selling snake oil, and it sort of made any narrative. It kind of, we're still here today, but it's like a free for all. It's like pick your own adventure. It's like, oh, you want to go down this narrative? Yeah, this is your truth. Oh, you want to do this? Like, oh, this is your truth. And like, there's sort of, I feel like not really a strong consensus of like what is truthful, and like everything just seems extra subjective
right
within the past like 4 to 5 years.
For sure.
Yeah, so I would say like I don't know, it kind of is like the rug got pulled out a little bit, and it's like everyone's trying to sort of find their footing again, but it's, I don't know, I've gotten to a point where I'm like, does the rug even like need to be there? Like, do we like have to have this? Yeah.
Fuck it.
So, I recently watched a no, sorry, not recently. I've recently rewatched this video where in 5 minutes, Terence McKenna, like it's called Terence McKenna Denounces Relativism. And it's just 5 minutes of just pure fucking gold of him just talking about, I don't know, just kind of like this very problem. And I think this lecture was like from the early 90s, judging from the like the video quality or whatever. But it's happening hardcore now where, yeah, like relativism and things like postmodernism is just kind of ripping through any concern for, like you said, Jason, like anything that is kind of truthful, or, I mean, reality is, that word reality is such a loaded word now. You know, what my reality or your reality, and confusion, and no one's really speaking the same sort of language anymore. So what is gonna like save us, right? I mean, are we beyond saved, or is there another thing or activity that hopefully can create some kind of cohesion so that we can hopefully kind of dance in the right directions instead of the constant conflict and yeah, the discomfort in the isolation socially anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have no but yeah, then another part of me is like, wait, but enough with this, you know, search for reality or things that are going to say, oh, finally some objective reality, thank God, or something like that. Let's have a little fun, right? Let's be the clown, or let's do the thing, and let's just see how far this hole can go. Part of me is kind of taking on that sort of clownish trickster sort of a personality too.
Yeah, fiction seems to go a long way. So
yeah,
I feel like everything that's happening has been written about in some way before.
yeah. And then I think that who was it that said Terence McKenna said true enough. So there isn't like truth in capital letters or something, but there's the true enough. And then was it Robert Anton Wilson said logic, maybe.
You see a lot too, like I get slapped in the face with this when like so Carl has a daughter, and whenever like I sign into YouTube or something, we all have like the same account, and sometimes it's like her YouTube account, and it's like a completely different world, you know. It's like, what are all these videos? Who are all these people? I don't know any of this, you know. And I'm sure she feels the same way when she sees mine. I'm like, wow, everyone has like a completely curated reality online.
Yeah,
you know, that's like completely different than everyone else's.
It's like, it's cool, it sounds cool, and it's also terrifying, you know.
Yeah, maybe it's cool and terrifying.
Yeah,
because I like it. I don't like any of the stuff on her YouTube. I'm like, what is this? I don't want to put on makeup while I'm listening to murder mysteries or whatever.
But, you know, speaking of how, you know, media technology really does and knows how to sophisticatedly sort of get in here, I think it's very wise that we kind of draw some, you know, some boundaries and make real discernment as far as our relationship with media technology. I'm just about to finish reading Eric Davis's book Technosis, which really, I mean, I read that in the midst of the pandemic when I was isolated with media technology for the most part, you know, and the book gave me a certain vantage point to look at humans and their relationship to tech in such a way that I mean, I'll be forever grateful for, and slightly resent, because I'm watching everyone just kind of like get the you know, the thing in the Matrix, get the thing like attached to their head. Like it gave me a vantage point to watch that happen in real time. And it was just like, whoa, this thing here is creepy. It's creepy now.
it's pretty creepy, and it listens all the time, and that seems very clear.
Yeah.
Mm.
I guess my thing is that like, I don't know. I know everyone sort of has like a tormented relationship with technology and social media. I think on one end, I think it is a tool, like, I mean, as you both know, to like get your art out or to maybe get your voice out in a way that wouldn't have been possible, you know, 20 years ago. So that's like a positive, but I myself, like, I hate that something assumes that it like knows what I like. I get like almost like a violent reaction to it. Like I don't take pleasure in like what my phone shows me. I just don't. Or like algorithms on Instagram. Like it's I don't know. I've backed off like a little bit. I think my thing is that I like mourn original content, and some people do it, but for the most part, it's like seeing the same thing, which is usually not very intelligent, or it's like middle brow at best, like seeing the same thing posted over and over and over. Like I have to stop looking because I have my own thing with repetition. Like I don't love it. And it makes me feel like I'm going insane. That makes things feel very uniform, and I find it a little scary. It's like this group think beehive mentality that I don't think it's actually doing anything, and it freaks me out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, I guess.
No, and you can see it on all sides of the like political spectrum. It's just like, you know, people say more to the left get mad that people on the right are all like spouting the same kind of meme nonsense about QAnon or whatever. But then like all my friends who I love dearly, it's like literally a meme will come on and like every single person I know, not everyone, but a lot, will share the same meme. And I'm like, how do you know that that meme's real either? You know what I mean? Just because that meme resonates with you, that could be a bunch of bullshit information too. And people just share. It seems really dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think that it's a sort of fallout or like symptom of like of 2020 and guilt, which was like, no, like I knew this, I knew this, and maybe you didn't know everything about America or race or politics, but no one wanted to like sort of admit that. And I think whatever that trend was, I feel like social media and the algorithms like really caught on to that, and everyone has just sort of bought into it. So I think it's much less about the information that's being provided and more about not wanting to be left out, which I think is ultimately like, I don't know, a source need of a lot of humans. I don't think it's the best quality to have, but I think it's very real. And I think we're just still in that, but it does feel robotic and weird.
Like groupthink.
Yeah.
I've touched upon what feels like a lineage of internet chaos magicians that are using memes in the form of what I think it's called memetics, and they're, you know, like basically using memes as almost sigilizing memes, trying to figure out how to word it, sigilizing memes to sort of have an effect in the cyber sphere. But yeah, you know, the techno pagans, I guess we'll call them, which I don't think is a new term. Yeah, I think that was a term that was kind of coined, I think, in the early internet days. But yes, there are internet chaos magicians out there that are, you know, channeling their magic through memes. I think that's pretty cool.
I used to have a friend I have a friend that works in advertising who is a chaos magician, and he like had to develop logos for companies. And he's like developing a logo for a company is essentially like making a sigil for that company, which you then like shoot out into the world, you know?
Yeah.
Chaos magician sounds cool.
Now I know there's a relationship between the origin of chaos magic and Topi. Is that correct? Would that be correct?
That would be correct.
They're kind of like from the same sort of nebula.
From the same era. Yeah, exactly. And Topi was definitely, full of chaos magic. It's like build your own magical way of being, taking from whatever kind of currents that you like or that resonate with you, and then put it together. It's like a self magic collage of self. Absolutely. I love it. I mean, for me, it's the only way to work. I've been initiated into a couple of different traditions, and I love them and I respect them deeply, but at the end of the day, I just kind of, I don't know, just do my own thing, and I venerate, pay respect to all of my entities that live with me. But I'm just very much kind of a chaos magician at heart.
Well, I'm definitely for chaos magic. Not all practitioners. There's one quite famous one who's now always going on about QAnon, and he thinks chaos magic and QAnon are the same thing, which is quite, I guess in the logic of chaos, you could probably propose that, but it just seems too ridiculous. I mean, I'm all for the Discordian vibe, but I mean, why go right wing? There's enough right wing people in the world. It's hardly a kind of subversive point of view. I mean, about 75% of the world is technically politically conservative. So if you want to be a chaos magician or any kind of subversive outsider, going with the 75% seems a ridiculous position to have. That doesn't mean one has to be left-wing, like me, or, whatever. But I mean, it has to be somehow different from the majority, and I think that's what is kind of missing with QAnon, and a lot of these kind of literal-minded conspiracies, is they just buy into very obvious and mainstream thinking, but they just do it via the side door, and they think the side door is the magic door to the universe. And I just think, mate, it's not about how you get there, it's where you're going. And if you're just going to the mainstream and sitting down with the Republicans or the Brexit conservatives, it's not an interesting position to take. And I think magic needs to be a lot more dangerous than that, and I think poetry needs to be a lot more dangerous about that. And I think what people miss with the idea of danger is that the most dangerous position a person can take is vulnerability. And that for me is the starting point of the work. How do I, as for the want of a better term, the artist, how do I make myself vulnerable? And that for me is always the starting position. But I was reading a quote someone posted actually on Twitter from Bell Hooks about the wounded child, and she proposes that what makes the child wounded is that when they start to speak truth or they start to speak a kind of honesty, they are immediately shut down, which then wounds the child. And then that kind of repression is what then distorts their personality into what people or society or the structures around them expect them to be. And I think, when we look at Reich and Jung and Freud, they're always asking us to look at what is uniquely individual to ourselves. And that's where I think, for me as a writer, maybe for others too here, that is my starting point. What story do I have to tell that is unique to me, to the kind of complex components that makes up oneself? And I think for me that's where magic gets interesting. And that's Peter Kingsley has this, not actually a big fan of his work, but I find it interesting. He just written a book on Jung, and basically Jung visits him in dreams and stuff like this, and the book is a kind of half-channel text sort of thing, but also very well researched. And he says the problem Jung had with Jungians is that they're always exploring his myths, they're not finding their own myths. So they're all like going to alchemical texts and they're all reading alchemical texts through Jung. What if alchemy is not their myth? What is their myth? What should they be reading alongside Jung that Jung himself didn't read or wasn't that interested in, but is unique to that thinker, to that one who is studying? I think that's kind of, for me, where, art and psychology and poetry all kind of meet together in mystical practice. Yeah. I'll get off the soapbox now. Yeah.
Yeah, but Jung was all about individuation. Jung is all about individuation and not being a Jungian. He didn't want to make other Jungians. He wanted people to individuate. And I feel like the same thing has happened with Lacan. Lacan's like tried to shake it up, or maybe, I don't know, personally, maybe being around him, he was much more kind of authoritarian figure, this kind of master figure, but his theory and the way he works totally was about shaking things up. And now there's like so many Lacanians that are just like parsing out what he meant here and what he meant there, and like just trying to like be exactly like him or know exactly what he was talking about instead of just like thinking for themselves. It's fine if you want to research and study that way, but I feel like in practice you shouldn't be worried too much about that.
Yeah, I'm all for the kind of hard study of the subject. I'm not like I'm not, I think, particularly with Jung, it's really important to actually, for me, to really go into the details of his thinking. But then once I spent, I don't know, 10 years studying Jung's work. Now I don't actually read Jung very much now. I mean, when did the last thing I read was the Red Book, which was about 3 years ago now. But where does that lead? Where does that kind of deep thinking then lead me? That then is the question. How do Jung wasn't particularly interested in kind of body work, but I'm very interested in theatre. I'm very interested in the body and how in the Reichian sense, how memories and fantasies and dreams live in the body. And I think for me, Jung didn't really go far enough into that field, so I had to look elsewhere, and I found that in kind of theatre and live art practice. Jung's theory on gender are quite primitive nowadays, though for me still very fascinating, although overtly heteronormative, which I find problematic with Jung. So how then can I kind of distort and adapt and even mutate his thinking into a kind of myth that is more contemporary and current? And I think that's, that for me, the Jungians who I really respect and admire are those who are kind of taking Jung into areas where Jung himself wouldn't have thought to have gone. They obviously lived in a different age with a whole different kind of context and culture and a whole different kind of mannerism to the present one. Yeah.
Tom, what I liked what you said was that like I relate to, I think a lot of writers relate to, is you said something about like the child, like when their vulnerability is shut down. And to me, I mean, that almost sounds like the basis for art. I mean, it's a way, it's like a fuck you. And I've been thinking more about that lately, of how, like, within my own writing, I make it almost like obscenely intimate in a way. And I've thought about why, like, why, I mean, why? And I think, well, I think there is like a fuck you, like almost like vengeance element in it, of like, oh, well, I couldn't say this, well, I'm going to say it now. So yeah, no, I really like that.
I think this would be a good time to bring up Satan.
Yes.
I kind of found this sort of thread of the wounded child, individuation, and the existential compulsion in the archetype, say, of Satan, you know, and this thing that, you know, this casted out character who's sort of, you know, shunned and is sort of craving that sort of vulnerability again, and tying in, you know, the whole thing we were talking about, chaos magic and Discordianism. You know, it's like it sounds really cool, but no one kind of likes you. You know, when you have those, like, you know, like all my left friends, all my right friends, and then they're bickering about whatever, and then I just kind of come in the middle and I'm like, it's something with the sort of Discordian chaos magic sort of vibe, and yeah, no one likes it, you know. But as far as I'm concerned, it's the individual's voice, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah, LaVey called it the third way. You know, it's not one or the other. It's a different path, or it could be the middle path and be super Buddhist about it. But I think, you know, I've had people ask, like, what is this thing with Satan, Vanessa? And I think when you explain it that way, you know, with the Bible, say, you know, the Bible was written by the perspective of like the white colonizer man, right? We can understand that, this guy. And now, you know, he's demonized Satan and Lilith, right? And they're like these bad guys. Lilith is this demon as lured everybody in, and Satan was bad and had to put him in the other place. He didn't want to do what I said. And so if you look at those characters that way, then, like, of course, you can see a lot of people would identify more with the Lilith and the Satan characters that were like cast out and penalized and like put in their place, like put in another place, than with this like God guy who's a total asshole.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Seems pretty simple and clear to me.
Yeah. And my little poetry book, it was a way, I call it like, say, satanic romanticism or something like that, you know, because Satan and those figures they're really romantic characters, and truly romantic characters. And I wanted to kind of get a different perspective of like the satanic sort of vibe, because a lot of some of the people around me that kind of their associations with Satanism is like this, I don't know, sort of edgy tough guy kind of thing. And I don't know, that's not how it is. That's not how I look at it. Like, it's very rich with vulnerability, say, and the wounded child, and, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah,
there's always these pictures of Baphomet on on Instagram, and they always show him as this kind of warrior-esque masculine figure. And then you go back to Eliphas Levi, and it's like this androgynous goat. And I mean, it's this beautiful androgynous goat. It's not some like masculine warrior, you know. It's got huge breasts, you know, and a Mercurius phallus, you know. It's a very kind of poetic, feminine, kind of sensual image, you know. And the goat head doesn't look angry. It looks really sweet, actually, you know. Looks like you have a nice conversation, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, that's always the you know, I really love Satanism, but you know, all this hardcore masculinity, Satan's a huge phallus erupting in everyone's faces. Like, give it a rest, mate. Just go to a gay orgy instead.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, thinking of like the devil in terms of a lover is interesting. And the book that I reference, I Await the Devil's Coming, the main character, Mary McLean, who's like stuck in Montana. I mean, on every page, she basically is saying, and I await the devil's coming. And to me, that was the devil. No, I don't think she meant it as like an actual like physical being. I think the devil was her way out. I think the devil was sort of her escape, because it wasn't going to happen on her own, because there was no one else there. But to me, the devil really resembled a lover in that respect. It's like she wanted someone to like love her and see her and take her out of her family, of her hometown. So yeah, I like thinking of it that way too.
I think there's a part of us that's stuck in Montana, you know. We've just created a new archetype, and it's stuck in Montana, waiting for the devil's coming. But Tom, yeah, I really like what you were saying about, you know, exploring and creating your own myths, your own or mythic sense of living, and not living out another tradition's or another culture's thing, or gimmick, whatever you want to call it. You know, creating your own archetypes and things like that. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, that's very satanic as well. Creating your own environment, your own way,
and being punished for it too, right? Because I'm sure it gets you do it out of a kind of spiritual isolation or loneliness or something like that. I imagine, but that's the relationship, I guess, right? You know, with Tom, how you said magic is dangerous, you know, and as we were talking earlier, technology has that kind of weird nature too, where it's kind of dangerous and very useful, but yes, also dangerous. It's got that sort of Promethean kind of vibe to it. And Prometheus is kind of like the Greek Satan, I guess we can say, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think like technology is rewiring our brains. I think like the brain is now sort of restructuring itself via the iPhone, the Android phone, whatever, the iPad, you know. I mean, I sort of realized this when I did some LSD not that long ago, and I started seeing visions as if I was looking at an iPhone, and I was like, fucking hell, I need to get off my fucking iPhone.
Wow, oh, that's depressing.
Whoa, yeah.
And they're saying that when I was a teenager, we would do pills and go to the fridge in Brixton, and I used to play a lot of video games. I haven't played a video game in ages, nothing against them, just not my thing. You know, I used to see visions of Mario Kart and stuff like that. So, you know, and I don't see them anymore. So hopefully it's not long lasting.
Yeah, my appreciation for, you know, the meditations and visualizations that I learned with, you know, studying Buddhism was that it allowed me, thankfully, to kind of have a general sense of the internal circuit and wiring, so that I might have some say in how it's being rewired with today's technology.
Yeah, I think there's interesting possibilities about how the two can connect in more conscious ways rather than allowing it to happen unconsciously. Have you got more thoughts about that?
I've been managing it by like, I do my email and anything related to the computer, like while I'm working, you know, I see patients, and then while I'm like in that period, that's when I deal with all of that. You know, I do it either in between or like a little bit before, a little bit after. And then when I'm done with like that period of my day, I just close my computer and I don't look at it anymore. And then nobody calls me. I mean, it's just like nobody calls me like for personal reasons. So I don't need my phone or anything like for my daily life. So I just try to keep boundaries around it in that way. And that helps a lot, because what was frustrating me, I noticed, was like I couldn't read anymore. It's like I had no reading attention span. And I used to be able to just like read and read for hours and hours and hours, like all day if I had a day off. And I just like couldn't focus on anything. And I realized I think it's because of the computer. So I just had to put boundaries, because I can't not read. It's like not acceptable.
Yeah.
And I try to, even like on the weekend, like if I didn't have this today, I probably wouldn't be on the computer all day. Like I would just like not look at it, and then like have a total day off. And those days are like, they're hard in the beginning, but they're really precious when you get used to doing it. It's like, oh yeah, I get a day screen free, you know?
Yeah. I think going forward, where, you know, like when we were growing up in school, you had like a mandatory like health class, you know, where it's like, oh shit, looking at the data, we have an epidemic of, say, a health crisis. So it's like, okay, let's make it mandatory where we have a health class in school and kids have to take it. I think going forward, we're going to have to do like a tech health kind of class, because the data is there that it's just like ruining people, you know. And I think there's going to be a class where, there's like, you know, if you spend too much time, this is what's going to happen, make some boundaries, etc. That's definitely what's going to happen with technology, if we're to kind of go forward with any hope of you know, our own individuation, I guess.
Not getting the cord
right
in the back of the brain.
It sucks too, because I mean, like with what I do, you know, I do a lot of entertainment and, you know, performance art and live stuff that I have to sort of promote and everything. So I feel glued to it sometimes, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm the same way. I have to sort of like, go into a body of woods, or, you know, swim or something to break the what I feel is starting to crystallize in my mind, you know, in my inner circuitry. So I'll have to do something to sort of liquefy it or something.
Yeah, because what depresses me a lot that I see happening is like people are now like with the fire log or whatever on YouTube, and people like watch that instead of having a real fire, and like so many animal pictures, and then like they have these amazing like videos of like the planet and all the whales and all this kind of stuff, and you can just see people like, we're destroying the earth and like destroying nature, but also like capturing it like digitally, like in this amazing technology where you can like see like the million eyes on the bug, you know. It's like so detailed, and so people are just gonna be like watching that and be like, wow, look at the earth, it's so amazing, while like it becomes like a total wasteland.
It's so dystopian. That is like, very Huxleyan Brave New World, like dystopian thing you just painted out right there. And what's worse is that it's true.
It's happening. Yeah.
One of the things I hate at the moment in the arts, this is just my little rant, is projection work. So for example, there's like this glass box that goes into the sea, and then it appears on the inside. I'm not sure if the projection is from the inside or if they project it from the outside, is on fire. And I've only seen it in pictures. I've never seen it in real life. And the pictures look amazing. They look, oh my God, this is like ingenious. Until I realized it was just a projection. I mean, how much more amazing would it be if you created that effect in real life and had real flames? I mean, and it's very, very possible to do. You know, it's not, you know, it's just kind of basic kind of mechanics that any sort of, you know, theatre technician, you know, maybe trained in the kind of European school could kind of do quite easily. You know, why do we need these fake flames? You know, it's not, it's kind of, and people go, well, isn't it like experience the ether? You know, Jung said, you know, the fire of Mercury does not burn the hands. But, you know, they were often not alchemists who were talking about that. They weren't just people sitting on the beach watching a light show on the water, when they could actually be seeing real flames and feeling the cold of the sea and the heat of the fire. Now that is much more alchemical than just beaming a bit of light, And I think, for me, we have to return to reality. One of the very interesting things, one of the things I really liked in the clown school I went to, which was a French clown school, but it wasn't either of the two famous ones. It was a very kind of different improvisational school. They'd always say, if you are presenting us with the imagination, reality has to come into it. So if you want to, I actually wrote a poem about this, but the poem's kind of fictitious, but the situation was real. Someone held a they mimed a box, and Vivian, the tutor, said, "The box is not real." And the workshop participant kept on miming it. And he said, "We know you don't have a real box in your hand." That's the comedy. That's the ingeniousness of it, is to know that you don't have a real box in your hand, and then reality can suddenly come back into that scene, and then suddenly you get that juxtaposition between reality and imagination, and you go back and forth between them, and that's kind of what's kind of interesting for me.
It's almost like you might as well could have been talking about like magic, like real practical magic, where what really caught me was the imagination and syncing it with or extracting reality from into it, because you could just say, oh yeah, I want this and I want that, but the magical process is that yes, you try and make it to where reality can syncopate with it or something like that. And it's funny, I think we all me, Vanessa, and Jason all our brows raised up when you brought up something about clowns, because you weren't here, Tom, when we had a whole conversation about the clown as this sort of remnants of a shamanic sort of the archetype of the shaman, the trickster sort of kind of character.
I got kicked out of the church. So I was sitting. I don't know, people who watch this might not know. I was sitting in a kind of churchyard because it was the only quiet place. And then we were talking about queerness and Satanism. I think the what do you call it? The groundskeeper, whatever, kind of shooed me on. So then I was trying to walk down the road and not have the cars sounding, and then my phone just died, and then I finally got back here. Anyway, yeah. For me, I perfectly concur with that thinking. For me, the Arto always called himself the fool. For me, he's a very important figure, and his idea of the body without organs. What does that actually mean? What is actually left of a body without organs? And the most obvious kind of example of that is the skeleton. The stripped bare, the skeleton stripped bare. And why is that important for magic? Arto was obsessed with occultism. He's obsessed with the idea of cursing and spells. In the asylum, he cursed everyone who upset him, which was everyone most of the time. But why is the skeleton so important? Because if the images are going to live, they need to go into the bone, into the most concrete part of the self, because it has to come into reality. No point doing a magic spell if it doesn't come into reality in some way.
Reading Mircea Eliade's work on shamanism, apparently, the bone was a super emphasized thing for early shamanic societies.
And what was it about the bone?
Yeah, like the bone was what it really, it was, you know, like you can tell everything about a tree when you like look into it, you know, when you see the rings and so forth. It's like it like contains our soul, if you will. Like that's what they felt it did.
Yeah, I think you know, Arto had a strange relationship to death, but I think that's a kind of side note. You know, but there is something about, you know, the bone as the kind of concretization of the body of light. I think that was his kind of vision in some sense. You know, I think, you know, some Arto scholars may think I'm being a bit idiosyncratic in that interpretation, and I would agree with them. But you know, I think that's one way to read it as well.
I also, like a psychoanalyst I saw speak once, said that when we laugh, we show our teeth, and that's the only bone that we see. And so it's like showing people like our bones, or even death, you know, like the core.
Oh, I like that. You remember the psychoanalyst? I think it's good to smile in the face of death. I mean, you know, you're going to die if you meet death. Yeah. So you might as well smile.
Yeah, it's a very, I think it's a Buddhist quote or something. I could be totally wrong, but I think I read it in the context of Buddhist literature, where yes, it was like, you know, they have like the Tibetan laughing skulls, you know.
It's Jean-Jacques Moscovitz.
Oh.
He wrote a great chapter in my book on psychoanalysis and violence.
And does Lacan has anything to say about humor?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm sure he must have analyzed and written his own take on Freud's book on jokes and their relation to the unconscious. But I can't remember anything specifically Lacanian about humor that's coming to mind right now either. But I've also not been in that kind of mind frame lately, so.
I can't think of Jung saying anything about humor either, actually.
Yeah, that's true. Jung wasn't really funny, and he also didn't write a lot about sex. He was very much more mythology.
Oh my God, if you read his later letters, particularly to Barbara Hannah, oh my God, they're so flirtatious, but they're so ridiculously flirtatious.
Yeah, but supposedly he had sex with like a lot of his patients, so he definitely was getting it on. He just and there was even a point where he had like his wife and Tony like together, you know, they were all like kind of living together. So he wasn't prude, but he didn't write about it much in his theory. Maybe that's why. Maybe he was like, I'm keep that on the down low.
In making the letters to Barbara Hannah, he's always like, I've had this vision of Aeon last night. And I was like, oh my God, just get a room, you two. You know,
Jung was quite the ladies' man. Unlike Freud, I think.
Yeah, Freud had very little sex other than his wife. I mean, there's even a possibility she was his only lover. He was her only. No, yeah, she was his only lover. Yeah, but I'm not sure that I'm no historian, so yeah, I can't really.
Yeah, I think he was very much wedded to her. But
which is funny.
Danny Nobis, I do have to tell you though, Danny Nobis did tell me that because he's writing a book on Lacan, and he got into some sort of archive. Oh, he used to be the chair of the Freud Museum in London, so he had access to archives that's not published yet, and so he had access to all of Marie Bonaparte's letters to and from Freud, back and forth, and he said they were very. She was really trying. She was like throwing herself at Freud. So, but I don't think it went anywhere.
I got told off at a Psychoanalytic Association for saying it's likely Freud was bisexual. And I think that's probably true. I mean, the 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, the first edition, which is quite different from the post-Oedipal kind of the one we're familiar with. Who was it? Verso. They translated and published the first edition. And basically, Freud says he keeps on going back and forth and changing his mind, but the overriding kind of argument is that the child, in terms of a kind of infant sexuality, is bisexual, that they're equally drawn and attractive to both of the sexes. And also they see themselves as androgynous. They don't have this kind of clear differentiation between the sexes. And then Freud then kind of argues around 10, 11, going into puberty, those differentiations then start to crystallize. And in his mind, he argues, obviously, that, he puts forward a kind of heterosexual argument that the male then turns to the female and vice versa, and, and that crystallizes their sense of their own gender. But, it's a very kind of interesting idea that the distinctions aren't instilled in the mind, that we have to somehow learn them, and I think once again it comes back to this question of vulnerability and kind of finding the different kinds of genders that live inside of us. So when we dream, we can dream of the opposite gender as as being inside of us, as being a voice, and as being a kind of image and a body inside of us. And I think that's really kind of interesting, and something that I think it's an idea that psychoanalysis are kind of overlooked, and it's kind of Freud's fault with the Oedipal complex. But I think Judith Butler's Gender Trouble kind of brings that idea back into focus. And for me, I mean, it's an extraordinary theory, and it's one that I stay actually pretty close to with Freud. But also, I don't think it should be a thing we just grow out of. I think that was kind of, the idea that we should grow out of it is to me ridiculous. Particularly as, quote unquote, an artist, that's where the good stuff is. That's where all the kind of the mixing of fantasies and ideas and images and memories exist, in that kind of whirlpool of the id, the seething cauldron of excitations, as he calls it.
Yeah, I was saying there's a very primeval wildness to that as well that I'm picking up on.
Yeah, I'm absolutely for that.
Yeah. The kind of archaic revival that I really like that term.
Yeah, this return to the pre-Oedipal wildness of the self. And obviously, you go through, you go through art school or whatever, and you do these practices that take you back into that place, and then there's a chance. And I think that's what's interesting, and it's interesting in terms of therapy, that when a person goes into that place, then they can start making choices. That then they can start to have choices about their sense of self and how that sense of self grows again. Like the phoenix renewing itself.
The alchemical process starts to make sense here, real sense anyway.
And there's the difference between, that happening in childhood and then that happening again as adulthood is you've got that conscious voice which is able to somehow direct elements of it. And I think that's kind of fascinating. You don't get a complete say in it, but you get a little bit of a say about how you want your personality, or how a person's personality wants to rise again, how it is to be shaped and reconfigured. And I think my old boss, Patricia Clarkson, her paper on metanoia means a kind of turnaround. It's an idea that comes very much from Gestalt, but it's also in Jung, that, you know, this kind of revisioning and returning of the personality into something other than what it is, you know, and and she outlined a kind of I think it's 7-level model. I'm not going to be able to recite all the stages, but the idea is that through intensifying the self and all the voices and images of the self, that they can then kind of be turned around. So in a practical example, if someone's internal relations have this kind of deep negativity to them, if someone has never been told that they've been loved, they would never really hug, they were never really nurtured through a kind of tendency of care and love, you know, those voices are going to be quite, in Freud's sense, they're going to be very kind of repressive. They're going to be of the superego. They're going to push a person down, you know, and their self is going to be incomplete. There's nothing to tell them that they're worthwhile. There's nothing to tell them that they have a purpose. There's nothing to tell them that they are loved and are able to love another person, you know. So the idea then of therapy in Petruska's sense is to change those voices, to redirect, to turn them around into a loving presence for that individual, which then reshapes them. I hope that makes sense. That might have just been a
Well, no, I would. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, I think it makes like total sense. I've always thought of it in a way of like, it's sort of like, in a way, ripping up everyone else's narrative, and then sort of maybe finding your own, or like including kind of ripping up those narratives and rearranging it. Because sometimes it's like, especially, I mean, if everything like starts with the family, it's like, it's everyone else's narrative. It's your parents' narrative. It's your sister's narrative. And sometimes the individual is like a sponge. And so, yeah, it could take some ripping up, or like some sort of change to then find your own narrative. And then actually thinking of things in terms of that, and how does that rearrange things? How does that change not only how you see yourself, but like maybe even a larger narrative than that? Like, what's the story? I guess. And I think therapy kind of offers a doorway to figure out what the stories are, instead of this one like continuous thing, which oftentimes is boring.
Yeah. So my first, I guess the tradition, the spiritual tradition that I first found a kind of refuge in, you know, in my teens, in my troubled teen years or whatever, was Tibetan Tantra. And essentially the whole, I guess, gist of it was to take this dark, say, matter, karmic infestations and transmute them. There's a constant talk about transmutation in the Tibetan tantric sort of jargon. You know, this taking of these primeval energy and channeling it, and say, you know, making it into, say, light or loving kindness or compassionate energy, as you were saying, Tom, like changing the voices, you know, changing the creating a new manifestation of a substance. And yeah, it kind of ties in a very alchemical sort of language too. So I think that all throughout there's this kind of thing, that this alchemical vein, right, of what we're talking about. And it's been running through art, and it's been running through therapy, and it's been running through I think a lot of what what we've touched base on.
Thank you for listening to Rendering Unconscious. You've just heard a discussion between Tom Bland, Jason Haaf, and Zaii Valdes. Follow them on social media and check out their books. Tom Bland is Physis93 at Twitter, and his new book is Camp Fear from Bad Bready Press. Jason Haaf is Haafwit at Instagram, and his book coming out is Harsh Cravings. And Zaii Valdes is Ronin vs. Strawberry Ice Cream, and at Violet Silhouette Official at Instagram. If you're in South Florida, be sure to check out Violet Silhouette at La Rosas in Miami this weekend, Saturday, February 26th. And if you're in London, be sure to check out Tom Bland's poetry at Queer Erotica at The Glory. And now we're going to have a listen to Violet Silhouette's song, a cover of Godstar by Psychic TV. You can find more at violetsilhouette.bandcamp.com. Enjoy.
Save you somehow, God stars, God stars. Oh, God stars, God stars. Yeah, God stars, God stars. Oh, God stars, God stars. Where were all your friends that night when you switched off the final line? I saw your body like a lamb going to the slaughter. God stars, God stars. Oh, God stars, God stars. God stars, God stars. Oh, God stars, God stars. Started to steal your glory. They never even told your story. God star, God star.